Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Aisha and this is episode 2. And today, inshallah, we're talking about unconscious negativity. Now, in our deen, Allah Ta'ala has given us a few things that we need to do to keep our relationships with one another healthy and loving and beautiful. One of those things is that we should have good positive thinking about one another. So here we are in this program called Defying Gravity, and this is actually one of the weightiest issues that we come in contact with. It weighs us down. It weighs our hearts down and makes us feel so negative and gloomy and awful, meaning what we think about other people. So here we want to learn about this issue and learn also how to become more aware of our thinking so that we can have husni zan, meaning good thinking, and not sui zan, negative thinking. So I laugh sometimes because my husband tells me, Aisha, why don't you have more husni zan about me? And I do actually have, a lot of husni zan about my husband. We have a good marriage, alhamdulillah. And I tell him jokingly that, I have asli zan, like actual zan. I know what you're actually doing. It's not a matter of good or bad. It's actual, right? And I just made that term up. There's no such thing called asli zan. So most sisters who come to me don't come to me saying, hey, Aisha, I am such a negative person. Can you help me? No, nobody says that. Most sisters who come to me with a lot of problems come because of how other people are. And I usually end up helping them with how they think about other people, because most people have such negative thoughts and we're totally unaware of them until we sat down and talked about it. So at the end of the day, I spend a lot of time guiding sisters on how to think better about things and better about people. If I tell you that you're a negative person, it's not a judgment about you or about your essence or about who you truly are, not at all. We are talking about brain patterns of thinking, brain feeds, into our thoughtmosphere. We have an atmosphere. I call this thoughtmosphere. So for example, a sister comes to me and says, Aisha, can you help me with my husband? He's so negative and critical and yada, yada, yada. Or Aisha, my mother-in-law is so negative and so critical. Ladies come to me and they ask me about these things. So then I start talking to them about mirroring. And if you spot it, you got it. And what you see in other people is really just a projection. And I'll say with negativity, that is also true. So in a nutshell, the way it looks is that somebody will come to me and they will be complaining about someone else's complaining. They will be angry about someone else's anger. They will be frustrated that someone else can't manage their own frustration. So I think a lot of times people think that they're pretty positive, but really they're not so positive. And they don't think or they don't recognize how negative they are because they feel like their judgment about other negative people puts them in a non-negative group. It's like there's this group of people that aren't negative, and I'm not one of them. Okay? It's ajeeb. It's very strange. But that's the way people think, and they don't realize it. That as soon as, somebody labels another group as negative, that means that you're being negative about that group. And so that puts you automatically in that group. Isn't that crazy? But that's true. Now we ask the question, does it matter if you're a negative person? And what I mean by that is that you have a lot of negative thoughts. And yes, it matters because it feels terrible. And to live with a terrible feeling isn't healthy. And when you give other people credit for your negativity, you can't change it. Okay? When you give credit to other people for your negativity, you can't change it because you've dished off the responsibility of that feeling. You have to own your feelings. They are yours. So you may not be walking around talking about how terrible life is, or how nothing works ever, and about how you're never going to be successful or get what you want or get what you need. You might not be talking, walking around talking about that, but that's what most people think. Kind of like, have you seen Eeyore? If you don't know who Eeyore is, Google him. It's Eeyore. Eeyore. So if you see Eeyore's face, he's like kind of sad and kind of, depressed looking and grumpy. That might be how he looks. It's kind of funny and kind of sad at the same time. If Eeyore is not you, you might be one of those people who have this underlying thing, And that's what I see from a lot of people, is that they just don't realize that they have this unconscious negativity. And just remember that the more negative you are, the less you recognize it, which is also a really strange phenomenon. So recently, I worked with a sister, and she was a bit stressed out, and she was honing in on her negative traits, and she just got more negative and more negative. So basically what we need to be aware of is that whenever we start working on ourselves, we'll start, getting more negative about how we're so negative. And that's just going to compound on the problem. So don't fall into this trap and start judging yourself about your own judgment, okay? Work more on solutions. We have to work more in a solution-oriented way, and we're going to talk about that, okay? Because that's what was happening to that sister. She started to recognize how negative she was, and then she started like beating herself up about it. And that's counterproductive to what we want to do here. Okay, so how do we recognize our own negativity? So here's what I want you to consider. There are a lot of questions we can ask ourselves to sort of identify if we have this negative thinking. So that would be like, for example, do you complain about negative people? Do you see negative people in your world and do you complain about them? That's an indicator that you have unconscious negativity. Do you really notice when other people are being negative, and how does that affect you? Does it bother you? That's a negative indicator. Do you blame other people for the way they are? Do you get mad at people because they're not nice? Do you get offended easily by other people? If yes, those are indicators. If you think other people are doing their lives wrong, like they just can't manage anything, they're not doing anything right, or, not doing enough right, like they should be better at living their life, they should do things better, that's an indicator. And we have to be careful, right? We have to be super careful here, because a lot of sisters come to me and they think that, I've been working on myself, my life and everything, and I've gotten much better, but then they start thinking that other people aren't, They're not doing things good enough. They're not doing things right enough. I'm doing all the work and I'm doing such a thing. We have to be careful here not to fall into arrogance. That's easy to do. This isn't a trait we want to find ourselves anywhere near. How we view people is really important, because the way we think about people will dictate to ourselves how we treat them. And we are responsible for that. And speaking of how we treat people, one of the issues I hear a lot about people is that they're toxic. I treat them like this because they're toxic. Or I don't want to be around them because they're toxic. When sisters start talking to me about toxic people, like when they say other people are toxic, then I really, really, really know that they're interpreting other people negatively, like very, very, very negatively. That's a gigantic indicator of negative thinking. So if you have someone in your life that you think is toxic, and people love to use that word somehow, like poisonous, this person is poisonous. I truly believe that there isn't a poisonous person. And I know that's crazy because we hear this all. I don't really believe that. And I'll tell you why. There's only the way you think when you're around someone. And is it easier to think positive thoughts around some people than others? Yes. But that doesn't mean it's because the other person is powerful and amazing. No. It just means that it's easier for you to manage your mind around certain people rather than other people. So sometimes it's easier for us to be nice around some people, and it's harder for us to be nice around other people. That's true. So if for some reason you have a hard time, let's go through an example so we can illustrate this. Let's say you have a hard time being good or whatever in hot weather. Like, I'm at home today and it's like well over 100 degrees, but I love hot weather. I don't have a problem with the heat. And so if I was someone that had a hard time with hot weather, I could say, you know, the hot weather is toxic, right? If I had a hard time, you know, with my behavior in hot weather, I could say hot weather is toxic. It's not good, and nobody should ever be forced to deal with hot weather. And so I'm never, ever, ever going to be in hot weather again. All right. How ridiculous does that sound, right? Because I have a hard time being a nice person when it's hot. Now, just because I have a hard time in hot weather doesn't mean that the hot weather is toxic. No. Just because I have a hard time being around a certain person doesn't mean that person is toxic. No. It means the way that person I'm approaching, or I'm interpreting, or I'm experiencing is because of the way I'm thinking or how I'm labeling that person as being toxic. So if you start looking at the world that way, like you need to delete things or remove things from your life or hide to avoid certain things or certain people because you can't deal with them because you think they're bad or you think they are toxic, then it's important for us to recognize what's going on in our own brain. And I can't even tell you how important that is. We have to recognize in our lives what's going on in our brain, because there's no such thing as a toxic person. There's just you, right? There's just you acting in a toxic way in your own mind. Now, don't get offended by that, okay? If you hear yourself in your own mind thinking that people should be different than what they are, then you're just indulging in some negativity there. People will say, I just don't like them, I don't like that, it's a personal preference. And we start to like or talk about our desires and our likes and our wants as if we don't have control over them, as if we just notice that that's our preference, instead of really understanding why we're actually making that choice to like or not. Anytime we make a choice to like something or to like someone or not to like something or someone, it is for a reason. And it's okay to have a reason as long as we're aware of what that reason is and the train of negativity that may be there, and not try to justify it and not try to lie to ourselves. We can make any choice we want in our life. We can choose to like or not like whatever we want in our life. Choices, though, we have to remember, come with consequences. But we need to notice the judgment and notice how it feels. And then we're going to notice that a lot of times we have a pattern, and we need to recognize that pattern. Because sometimes people say, I don't like this person because of this or that reason. I don't like this person because of that. And I'm okay with that. That's what they'll say. But then the negativity about those people and the justification for not liking them spurs more negative thinking. So then people think of lots of reasons, right? But we need to shift our thinking a little bit. And we need to dislike or like behavior instead of associating that with the person. We need to be aware of this. Okay? Because it affects how we treat people. And we don't have this option to treat people badly because we don't like them. The Prophet ﷺ used to treat people nicely. even when he didn't like them. He never hid from anybody, you know. He didn't avoid people, you know. His objective was different. Whenever he would interact with anybody, his niyyah, his intention was to help that person become better. So we can't really do that whenever we have this in our mind that we hate that person because of XYZ thing. We're taking it so personally. Whatever that person does or is or says is because of their choices, not ours. And it's because of their issues, not ours. But we're accountable for how we react. Okay? So the strange thing is that we all do this. You know, we create personal biases. We make judgments. And then you know what we do? We try to prove those personal biases and judgments. We work really hard on that. You know, we make a decision, we make a thought that we don't like this person because that person is mean. So then we stack up evidence for or against, you know, that person. And then we say, yeah, see, I knew that person was bad because of this, this, and that. I knew it. People say this. And it's a very strange thing that we do. And we don't even realize that. So we need to start paying attention to the thoughts that we have about people and why we think those things. Sometimes people say things or do things and it's nothing to do with us. Right? It's a reflection of their own misplaced and displaced feelings. It's their issues. It's our issue how we respond and what we do, what we think, how we treat them. That's what we're accountable for. All right? So we're accountable for how we react. So whenever we think someone is being very negative and when we think someone is being like obnoxious or rude, you know, we need to be able to separate that behavior from how we are interpreting it. That's important. Okay? So what we need to do is have a piece of paper, or rather get a journal, make a journal, and separate what they said, and then separate what we think about what they said, right? What is our interpretation? What is our thought about what they said or what they did, right? What's interesting to do, and maybe you have to do this after you're away from that person because doing it in the moment is really hard, but let's say you love a person and, you know, you thought that that person was funny or, you know, nice or charming. So think about what they did and what they said and how could you reinterpret every single thing that they said. We have somewhere in our mind a set of expectations. And when people don't meet our expectations, then we think thoughts about them, right? Sometimes bad. And this is arrogant of us, right? Because that person did not do what we thought that they should do, right? Our expectations. So if something hits us oddly or someone says something that strikes us in a certain way, we can think of how we can respond differently. How can we approach someone with love and not like we're trying to change them? We can't change people. That's not in our hands. We don't have control over people, just like they don't have control over us. We have control over ourselves by the things that we think, the things that we feel, and the things that we do. We can express how we think about what they did, yes, but we should do that in a loving way with the intention to be kind and to let them know, especially if they're unaware, that maybe they've hurt our feelings or maybe that didn't feel very good. You can discuss it, but not that you're trying to control them. You never give people ultimatums and say, if you don't change this behavior, then I am going to do XYZ. No, we can't expect that they're ever going to change. You can do whatever you want, but they'll only change whenever they're ready for that. And our intention as being brothers and sisters on this earth is to help one another become the best that they can be. So we need to do this with love, a place of love, not a place of I'm going to try to control you or give you ultimatums until you do what I want. That doesn't work. Okay, trust me. That doesn't work. So however we choose to address an issue with a person, we need to do that from a place of positive energy. Because if we do it from a place of negative energy, they're going to feel that. And that person may feel embarrassed or humiliated or shameful, and that's going to be counterproductive for what we want to accomplish. The Prophet ﷺ used to talk to people in respectful ways and loving ways and give advice for their self-correction. He pointed out good aspects about them with love, and he discussed the issues. People never felt bad about things that he said, like embarrassed, not in that kind of shameful way, not in the bad way, right? He didn't humiliate people, and neither should we. So the first step, what we need to do is we need to recognize facts, actions from our own interpretation, our own thought. So in our journal, we need to write 2 columns. We need to write just what happened. And that's just going to be like a very short sentence or so, right? Just exactly what happened and what we thought about that in the other column. Be careful not to mix up facts from what we think. Thoughts are not facts. Okay, that's what we think about what happened. That's what we think about the action. So we need to go through these mental exercises of thinking, because we miss this part somewhere or another, because really people are very confused about what they actually think or why they think it. A lot of people skip this whole process. When someone does something to you, they say, okay, you're awful. A lot of times they just go right into punching mode. It happens so fast. They say, oh, I wasn't thinking. They say that. That's what people say. They say, I wasn't in my head. I just wasn't thinking. That's the problem, my friends. We're not thinking. So we need to take a breather and start thinking a little bit. Okay? We need to think about what happened and how could we have thought differently about the situation. And practice that. That's all we want to do right now, because this is a very large task, is to practice thinking. And so that's all I have for you today, my friends. I hope, inshallah, to see you in the next episode. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us have good thinking about each other and help us be true helpers for one another so that we can all become our very best. Ameen.